Hey guys, I want to talk about the dangerous allure of shifting the blame. And the allure of shifting the blame is part of the appeal of the Hebrew black Israelites. And when you look at them, what they have done is they have armed racism and turned it into a religion, right? So when you look at the black Hebrew Israelites, what they've done is they've said this: white people are the cause of our problems. And so it's so convenient and it's appealing because you don't have to look at yourself. You don't have to look at anything you've done. You can just say, man, if white people wasn't around, we will be doing so much better. And the reality of it is that it is appealing because there is some truth, right? There is some truth that when you look at things that have been done to black people over history, there is some appeal to it. But the truth of the matter is that ultimately it's a lie, right? Ultimately, it is shifting the blame from yourself to somebody else for the cause of all your problems. Because ultimately, when you look at your own situation, the one who is the most responsible for where you are is you. And that's a hard position for most people to put themselves in when they're in a difficult situation. So I think about the black community, and you look at history and you look at just marriage rates since the 1950s, right? And if you look at America since 1950, we have gotten less racist. But that doesn't stop somebody who thinks about defunding the police from talking about the police being part of the KKK, right? And you can look at the police forces and talk about the fact that they've gotten so much more diverse since the 1950s. The policies have gotten so much better since the 1950s. We've gotten less violence since the 1950s. But ultimately, what we have is this. We have the appeal of being able to blame somebody else for your situation. It makes it, that appeal is so bright. It's almost like the moth, right? The moth is drawn to flames. But the truth of the matter is that the moth originally will be drawn to the moon, and moths would be drawn to the starlight, right? So they would be drawn to those kind of lights. But the flame is so nearby and it's so bright that it drowns out the moon. But the problem with the flame is that when you get near it, it can kill you. And so it is with this allure of shifting the blame. We oftentimes will shift the blame. And the truth of the matter is this appeal is something that is completely ruining our society. So when you look at black Hebrew Israelites, they shift the blame to white people. When you look at feminists, they shift the blame to men. When you look at the KKK, they shift the blame to black people. If you look at some other groups, they shift the blame to immigrants, or immigrants shift the blame to their country. People are always shifting the blame. And the truth of the matter is that you can always shift the blame because there's never somebody who has never have one little bit of fault, right? You can never say, well, you could always find some example of somebody doing something wrong and impeding somebody. And so it's easy to shift the blame. And then that goes into our other vice, which is the love of being a victim, right? People love being a victim. So if you can shift the blame and then you could be the victim, people feel pity for you. And we have gone from an empowerment society to a pity-based society where people are pushing for people to pity them. Now, the truth of the matter is when you're pushing for people to pity you, you realize there's nothing more unempowering. Or let me say, there's nothing that disarms you more from your own agency than putting the power that you have in the feelings of somebody else. In other words, when you are waiting for other people to pity you, your power is based on other people's feelings and whims, and you are subject to their will. So this idea of victim shifting and victim acceptance or victim triumph, what that does is it puts other people on a pedestal. It kind of reminds me of the idea that a lot of people say Black Lives Matter, and they will push Black Lives Matter, and they will want white people to say it. And I thought there was nothing more racist than that, because the truth of the matter is, what could be less black power than to think my life doesn't matter unless a white person says it does? Isn't that against everything that black power should be about? Why do I need somebody white to say my life matters for me to understand that my life matters? If I know my life matters, that's truly what matters. I know it matters. So my life matters. The truth of the matter is that your life matters as much as you treat that it matters. If you run a red light, like a lot of young black kids do, your life don't matter that much. If you commit crimes, your life does not matter as much. If you do reckless behavior, if you do drugs, if you overdose, you're showing by your actions your life don't matter that much. You would risk it over a momentary pleasure. But it's easy, right? You could take away your responsibility, your own agency, and ultimately you absolve yourself of blame. And it goes to this basic need that we have to justify ourselves. If you talk to a murderer in prison, he might even admit it's wrong, but ultimately he's going to start saying excuses. Even if you caught him dead on tape, it doesn't matter. He's going to shift. And in his mind, there's a reason why he murdered, right? In his mind, people did him wrong. In his mind, they truly deserve what he did. And so it doesn't matter how vile the crime is. You could say rape. You could say murder. You could say molestation. At the end of the day, the person who commits the crime truly doesn't feel like he did anything wrong, and that's why he did it. If he felt that it was wrong, he wouldn't have did it, right? And you can only do that when you shift. Again, you shift in the blame. You shift in the blame to somebody else. Now, it will be okay if only a few people shifted the blame and we marginalized them, right? And we shamed them so bad that we said, man, you are a pathetic human being to shift the blame to somebody else. But the truth of the matter is that is becoming more and more popular to shift the blame. And entire movements are made out of this. Like I talked about, the civil rights movement, feminist. Ultimately, a lot of the cultural left is doing this. And so we really need to think about that, right? This allure. And you got to resist it. Now, how are you going to resist this allure? Well, the allure is resisted only when you take responsibility for yourself and you give yourself agency. In other words, you say to yourself, I'm the reason that I feel the way that I do. I'm the reason I'm in a position that I'm in. And the only way for me to solve the problem that I have is for me to change. I have to change first. Not everybody around me, me. The idea of the old civil rights movement needs to come back. We will overcome. Well, it doesn't matter what everybody else thinks. What matters is what I am going to do and what is within me. That's what matters. So, hey, think about this. It's so appealing to shift the blame, but let's move past that. Let's grow from that. Let's get to maturity and let's take responsibility for our own actions.